Well, this afternoon I am with Ian McGonnigal from George P. Johnson.
Hi.
Hi there. And we're in the Boston office. Actually, we're in his office. So welcome to Ian's office, those who are our audience. Now, I've talked him into discussing with us lots of social media things. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Twitter. So Ian, tell us what's happening with Twitter today.
Great, thanks Joyce. And I'll try to couch my comments in how Twitter relates to event or experiential marketing. And after looking at Twitter and being a Twitter aficionado for the last year or so, I've learned quite a bit of things. First of all, by reading some of the experts out there like Chris Brogan and others, as well as participating myself. And you know, like many of you, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, learned from them, tried different things, and from the marketing perspective, there are several things that you should know and think about and consider while you're looking at integrating Twitter into your event program. The first of which is it's important to think about your community as a community first and the event second. So try not to think about how do I integrate Twitter into my event, but how do I integrate my event in the community that people are tweeting about? Because an event is a single point in time. It's got a short proximity where people are only available for that period of time in that fixed space. But a community and relationships you build within that community are long term. The second thing is if you are out there tweeting and you're building some sort of a presence on Twitter, especially in the event marketing space, decide what your niche is going to be. There are many people out there tweeting about many different things, and in order to be successful, of course, you could be yet another person talking about social media on social media. But if you're out there talking about something that you're really good at, that your company does, that's meaningful to your brand, you'll get a lot more traction as far as attracting followers and being able to become a viable part of that community. The third thing we'll talk about are followers. And when you're on Twitter, followers don't happen magically. You need to understand a little
they
bit.
don't?
No, they don't. You need to understand a little bit about human psychology and how to attract the right followers. So it's important to, first of all, decide who you want to follow. Follow people that are either within your niche or outside of your niche that talk about interesting things that are relative to you, and follow them. It's also a good idea to look at those followers and attract them by supplying relevant content, fresh content that's useful to them. Twitter's not the best place to be narcissistic and really talking about yourself. You want to be sharing as much that you're learning from the community with the community as possible. Otherwise, not that you'll be blacklisted, but sometimes it's very difficult to get the right type and number of followers. Number of followers, that might be your game. You might want to be like Ashton Kutcher and get millions of followers. But realistically, what you're probably interested in is getting people who are interested in who you are and what you have to say, which realistically is not going to be millions of people unless you're Ashton Kutcher. But if you do have the right niche, you're going to attract the right followers. Also, it's important to recognize that you're not the only authority on content. Even though you are an expert, or you may be an expert in something that you're passionate about, there are several other people that are good at what you do and good at what they do. So share their information, visit their blogs, promote them as much as they promote you, and over time you'll build a very strong following and a level of expertise that's really going to help you succeed.
Now, on this one, let me stop you. Is this, when we're talking about this, is the other authority people, then we're going to retweet them? Mm-hmm. Or am I jumping ahead?
No, retweeting is a good practice to get into. Part of it's retweeting, part of it is looking at their destinations or their blogs and tweeting them, be the first person who tweets interesting content. Mm-hmm. But it's also looking at any way that they're engaging online and try to participate in that. Outside of Twitter, you can leave comments on their blogs, you can invite them to comment on your blog, you can work together to co-produce different blog posts or share information outside of both of your worlds that really help each other succeed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. It's also important on Twitter to follow the 80-20 rule. And I can't tell you how many times I see that someone is drinking coffee or taking a nap or playing soccer online. And while that's interesting sometimes, it gives me a good sense of what someone's personality is and what they're interested in, I think it's better to blog about or tweet about those things that are most relevant to your community. So 80% should be value-added content. And remember, relationships are predicated upon a mutual exchange of value. So if you're adding value to the community, that's great. Then spend the other 20% talking about yourself, who you are, what your interests are. And remember, you don't necessarily want to contribute to all the spam out there and all those things that fill out your email boxes or your direct messages and Twitter, that sort of thing. Another thing that's interesting, not just for Twitter, but for all social media you participate in, and that's to think like a search engine. When you're posting, of course, it's good to have short and succinct posts, so you make it simpler and easier for people to retweet. In fact, 100 characters is the new 140, so you have 40 characters for people to retweet your content. But if you think like a search engine and you use keywords and terms that are relevant to your audience and your subject matter niche, it's going to be a lot more effective in people when they go back to try to search you and find out who you are and build up your own personal SEO, as I like to call it. You'll be able to really make their job easier. So if you're using something like Twitter search or IceRocket Twitter search, it really makes it, again, simpler for people to find the subject matter that you're tweeting about or retweeting about.
And that was IceRocket search?
IceRocket, yes.
That's something I've never heard of.
It's a fantastic search engine. It searches everything from Twitter to blogs to websites and that sort of thing. And it's a lot faster than search.twitter.com, which is what I like about it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
No problem. It's also a good idea when you're thinking about using Twitter, especially for events, is using hashtags. Create a hashtag for your event or for the subject matter or the community that you're working in, and look at those hashtags as a rallying point for your community. I belong to a group, for example, called Event Profs, so it's Pound Event Profs, and every time anybody in that community has something relevant to tweet, they tag it with that. We also use that for Twit Chat or Tweet Chat, which really is another application that you can look into that's very useful for events. And then finally, Twitter, I see, is not necessarily a destination, but it's a place to drive people to destinations. So if you're on Twitter, it's a really good idea to have a destination of your own or point people to destinations that are more relevant to them. For example, I have my own blog, experientialmarketing20.com, or other people have other destinations. It might be your company website, it might be your Facebook page, it might be your LinkedIn profile. Have a destination that people can go to and learn more about what you're saying and more about what you have to offer. And that's, in a nutshell, my top-level thoughts about Twitter. Thank you, Joyce.
Well, no, I'm going to have, there's one more question from the peanut gallery here. Let's talk about the frequency of tweeting.
Okay.
So how do I need to tweet every day? If I miss a day, what are bad things could happen?
Well, I think you should tweet as often as you can. The more you tweet, the more relevant you become because you've been able to amass a larger amount of content. However, if you tweet too much, you run the risk of becoming known as a spammer. I fall into the category of I try to tweet every day, but sometimes there'll be a few days when I'm traveling for clients or what have you, that you're just not able to do it. And then I'll try to catch up and retweet several things at a time. Experiment with it. Find out what works with your life. It is important to post regularly, and regularly can be loosely defined as maybe once or a few times a day, or it could be a few times a week. If it gets to the point where it's several weeks between tweets, I think that's a little bit too light. If it gets to the point where you're tweeting every 10 minutes, it's too heavy. Okay. So I think it's somewhere in between so that you keep your community interested and involved in what you're saying without becoming a spammer.
Good. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Joyce.